How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another Tier Talk Live. This is just a random Q&A being done on a random Saturday, kind of breaking away from our Tuesday schedule. And I'm going to discuss whatever questions come our way. This show is dedicated to you guys in the audience. So basically, whatever questions you have, we will try our best to answer those questions. Also, this video today is brought to you by Guardian RFID. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit Guardian RFID for more information. And American Military University as well. If you guys are seeking higher education and you want to bring that experience into the classroom, guys, Guardian RFID. American Military University is where you want to go to seek that higher education. Trust and believe, guys, they've been supporting me since day one. They're all about what we do in corrections. So again, if you guys want to get that degree and go ahead and teach in those classrooms, or even just to get a higher position at the job, you got to check out American Military University. They support what we do. All right, guys, so guess who I have with me today? We're going to have Russ. What's up, Russ?
Hey, Anthony. It's good to be on. Kind of a nice way to break up the day or whatever. It's hot here in California, let me tell you. It's about 99 degrees outside right now. I just finished my workout, so I'm sweating even more than usual. And I hope we're going to have some people join us. I hope we're going to have a good conversation about whatever comes up.
Yeah, and we do got one right now that already commented. Guys, by the way, it's a live Q&A, so questions that come our way from you guys is what we'll focus on today. But with that said, Dawn Marie does say hi. So hello, Dawn.
Hey, hello, Dawn.
Hey, she's going to share it out. Thanks, Dawn. I appreciate that. That means the world to me, guys. Don't forget, guys, like, engage, share. So me and Connie have actually had a chance to go on another channel called Duty Ron, which is great. We talk about like high profile cases, and last couple episodes we did were more about how these inmates who are now high profile spend their time in the correctional system. The last one was Chris Watts, and he's now at Dodge Correctional Facility. And they also had Keith Helwig on, and it was great because the audience that has been watching us on Duty Ron has now been coming over to this channel. So obviously, if they have any questions from the outside looking in, I would love to, answer those questions as well. So if you happen to be watching today's live, feel free to ask questions. But, I guess, Russ, just to kind of get the momentum going. What's up, John? A lot of the focus and the dialogues that we had with on Duty Ron was about dealing with high profile inmates. Hey, Sarah, lovely greetings from Sarah. What's going on, Sarah? By the way, Sarah, thanks for all the pictures of my kids. I'll put a picture up on Facebook and then she'll frame it. It makes it look really, really nice. So I appreciate that, Sarah. Hope everything is well with you and yours. But Russ, dealing with those high profile inmates, man, what do you think?
Well, I think, one thing that was great, it was really kind of fortuitous that Keith Helwig had actually worked at that particular institution, Dodge, at one time. So that's always great because, Keith is always a great guest for you to have on and stuff. So that part's awesome. As far as these high profile guys, yeah, that's a kind of a thing where, you really have to watch out. I mean, some of these guys, there's that element of being famous. And then some of them, they're truly infamous. I ran into guys like that all the time. At San Quentin, we had the founder of the Crips, Tookie Williams, and, a lot of high profile serial killers. And so those are the people, they always have, better access to the public, better access toward getting a story out there. And that can be detrimental to safety and security.
Yeah. And by the way, Derek says, just want to say thank you to Anthony and Russ. I'm starting on the 26th with the state. Use some of what you guys taught me in my interview process. Thanks. Hey, Russ, how does that make you feel?
Oh, that's awesome. Those are the fruits of our labors. We do a lot out there, just trying to, help people along the process, because we know that those people are eventually going to get hired. They're eventually going to, hopefully, matriculate through the higher levels, or even if they just stay an officer because that's their calling. I think it's just a great thing that we can do for corrections. Corrections, it's a great career, but there's a lot of things that really need fixing at a lot of different levels. So it's just great to hear that we're having that impact, and that we can start early having an impact on people who are just now starting to cut their teeth on this profession.
Yeah, guys, remember a while ago, we didn't have these things coming in. Hey, Kitty. Hey, all, I managed to catch the live. It's midnight here in Scotland. Hey, Scotland. Hey, wait.
Scotland.
I think I have to give Kitty Bloom, if I'm correct, I think I got to give her a shout out. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and give part of this episode over to Kitty Bloom. I think Kitty Bloom may have made a comment that I was hot or something like that. And I don't usually get a lot of that. Yeah, so thanks, Kitty. You made me feel good. It's okay, Kitty. We just got started anyway. So we got now I'm wondering if I should get a stab-proof vest. What do you think? So the first question comes from Derek. Now this is gonna hit personal for Russ. Before Russ answers that, we've done a lot of episodes in reaction to a lot of facilities that don't offer stab-proof vests or bulletproof vests, because they could also be stab-proof. For officers, I think it's something that should be done automatic. So the fact that you have to ask if you should get a stab-proof vest makes me think that your facility doesn't provide one, and that's tough when you work such a dangerous job. But go ahead, Russ.
Okay, so I'm a proponent of the stab-proof vest idea, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. But coming into this profession and stuff, you got to realize that what we do is dangerous, and that vest, that mitigates, one particular aspect of that. And I don't care whether you're in SEG or if you're in some kind of shoe or you're in a level 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. Everyone should be wearing those. Are there cons about wearing stuff like that? Yeah, it can get hot. I get cons back from some people that kind of, buy into some of these biases and stuff about, well, we don't want to, to intimidate the inmates. Well, no inmate is intimidated by a vest. We get, I had some people say, well, then they just really, they make it worse for you. Your injuries will be worse because the inmates know not to, stab toward your chest. That's not the way violent encounters work at all. The smaller areas that you have to protect, the better off you are. And then lastly, with a personal event that happened within our department, we had that vest on a shelf for one of our guys down there at CIM, and the department was refusing to hand out the vest, even though we had them on order. It was custom fit. It had his name and label and everything on it. And someone just, didn't like it or whatever. And he was stabbed and killed, right? Officer Manuel Gonzalez at CIM. And so there's a lot of great reasons that we should be wearing these vests. The most recent of which, we look at Lieutenant Lasco, and I mean, what happened to him? Could a vest have stopped that and saved him? Absolutely, right? It also could have, stopped some of the injuries that happened to the other officer that was there. Whether or not you should actually do it is going to depend on what they say in your institution about your policies and procedures. I kind of think that one of the things is that they get detractors started on people that do want to wear the vest, and that carries over, and that's bad. Everyone should be promulgating that and wanting to get those vests. Like I say, the heat, do you need some cooling stations, things like that? Yeah, but those things can be worked out. So yes, I'm a vest proponent.
Yeah, and guys, by the way, some of Duty Ron's here. So what's up, Duty Ron? And obviously we have Dawn Marie. She's been very helpful just now by sharing our stuff out. And we also have, as I said, Kitty Bloom, who's coming over also from Duty Ron. So we feel, privileged. Guys, if you have any questions, if you're from the outside looking in, feel free. We'll definitely be answering them. The thing about, I remember, guys, just recently we lost a hero, Eugene Lasco. He made an effort to save an officer's life. And unfortunately, he was murdered by the inmate. And you would think that that would get national attention and would start a movement where for those facilities that don't have it or are not issuing it to get on board. The sad thing is, and me and Russ have done videos on this before, is that we're reacting. You know, we wait for an issue to happen and then we jump up and do it, because even the death of Eugene Lasco didn't have to happen, because we've lost officers before and where the vest could have saved their lives, or at least, you know, again, when you have a vest, you know, you could kind of worry about protecting up here, you know, and knowing that the vest has your back. But when you don't, you know, it makes it harder for you to handle yourself, because at that point you're more vulnerable. But one person said something that got to me, and I've seen it. Russ, Larry Field said something pretty good. Department gives them vests, but 80% don't wear it. So I will say this before I go to Russ, is that when the department mandates a vest, that means when they give it out, it should be mandated. And for those that don't wear it, if something happens to you and that vest could have protected yourself, they won't pay out anything to the family. Because the vest at that point becomes the department's way of saving on the liability. But Russ, what's your thought on the people that don't wear it if they're issued it?
Okay, so this is where you really need the smarts of administration to come in, right? Because you can't just, say, okay, you have access to a vest, but we don't ask you to wear it. Because what happens is, I mean, whether people like to admit this or not, there's kind of a stigma attached to wearing the vest. Like, oh, well, you're not as tough if you're wearing the vest. Or they start with these, which I'll straight out say, are blatant misconceptions about, you'll suffer worse injuries if you do wear the vest. It's simply not true. If you make it mandatory and you make that, part of the uniform, that's the way you get everybody to comply. That's the way you're able to take on and make it an actual universal precaution. And that's the way that you stop your staff from being killed in the line of duty. All right. And like I say, there are cons to it. Yes. But for the most part, it can be a very proactive measure in stopping that. And why we have, departments and administrators out there that just kind of shuffle this along, it's all to save a little bit of money. What we need to do is we need to be saving lives, and we need to be giving the best possible equipment to our staff so that they can function in this highly toxic, highly caustic, highly dangerous environment that we're in each and every day.
Hey, so Lola J, I know we've seen this on our correctional feed, so we're gonna cross into manipulation, my favorite topic. Guys, if you get a chance, I do have a book on the market called Inmate Manipulation Decoded. It talks about how the games that inmates may play to get staff set up. I want to read something to you guys real quick before we talk about this young lady Gonzalez. So just to give you guys a understand. Actually, I could just explain. I don't really. So Russ, I don't know if you saw the. Let me get the article here, but let me just show you what Lola J mentioned. So I said Lola Gonzalez. I meant to say Lola J. Sorry, guys. I think the lady that got corrupted. Okay, a depraved California corrections officer is heading to the big house after putting on a sex show with an inmate as 11 other watched. Tina Gonzalez, 26, even slit a hole in her uniform pants to ease her liaisons with the male prisoner and supplied him with razors and privileged information while serving inside the Fresno County Jail. The disgraced jail guard was sentenced on Tuesday to 7 months in the county jail, followed by 2 years of probation. So Lola J goes, how could that happen? She was a hot babe, by the way. How can a young, attractive blonde be hired as a prison guard or officer? First off, I just want to say one thing before we discuss this. Now, obviously, there's a PREA violation here. So for those people on the outside, PREA is Prison Rape Elimination Act. Okay, the PREA has been implemented to protect the inmates from abuse of authority or also sexual assault from other inmates, voyeurism, sexual harassment, anything that kind of falls into that sexual aggressive behavior. Now, with that said, the officer is put into a position of authority. So inmates don't have a right to consent. So even if the inmate is willing, it's still being considered a rape. The funny thing is, if the shoe was reversed and this was a male officer who had did this to a female inmate, they wouldn't be getting just 7 months, in a county jail. They would be getting probably 3 to 10 years, but they also have contraband at the other end of this. And when I remember reading the article, this judge was like, well, this is the first time this person has ever done something like that, and whatever the case is. So at that point there, you're going to kind of give them like a little bit of a pass. Guys, this person, when you have this happen, this is what sets the example. So you're giving this person only 7 months in a county jail, to me, is a total disrespect to what we do and who we are. This person right now deserves more. They broke away from the professional role and they caused a risk to the facility. They separated themselves from us the moment they chose that path to be with that inmate. And I know some people may think, well, Gangi, it's just an inmate. Guys, in that wall, I'm not saying it's us versus them mentality, but we all have to be on the same page. And if there's a chance that an inmate can influence a staff member, then it puts everybody at risk. And it's the one thing that we have zero tolerance for. And look at this. The relationship led to what? It led to contraband. So the whole time, you know what this relationship was about? It was about bring me in something. Because if there was care that the inmate had for her, which, by the way, shouldn't have happened, but if there was, the contraband wouldn't have been the end result. He wouldn't be asking for that. But he knew that when they had this, not only she risking her job and going to go to jail, but now you have the contraband behind it. But Russ, this kind, I mean, and then you're slitting the hole in your pants and having sex in front of 11 other inmates. I mean, Russ, I'm going to get a picture of her, Russ, while you go ahead and give me your thoughts. And I want to talk about gender manipulation. So while Russ does this, I want to get the picture first. Go ahead, Russ.
Okay, yeah. When you read this article, there's a lot to unpack there, really. And so, what I would say in this particular instance, I'm pretty sure that she was co-opted and corrupted before she ever got there for things to be, blatant, doing these things in front of other inmates and that kind of thing, which may mean that this was a targeted idea by whatever Fresno gangs that there are. I mean, possibly. I don't know for sure because I don't have any inside information, but there are some significant Fresno gangs. So it's possible that they actually tried to get her into this position. It's also possible maybe she's just one of those people. We've all heard the term, like badge bunny, but you know what? There's STG gang bunnies too that are just into that kind of thing. So where exactly this falls on there, I'm not exactly sure. I kind of have to look at kind of whatever they were doing with regards to their background investigations that let her slide in. Maybe her background was perfectly clean. I don't see how it possibly could be from that perspective. So that's one part of it. The other part is Anthony's absolutely right. We can't let anything like this slide. You cannot have any kind of a personal relationship, let alone a sexual one with these inmates. And even though everyone does want to bring Priya up into this, Priya doesn't have any criminal results from it. So what we really need to see is we need to see these state district attorneys and attorney generals and stuff step forward and start prosecuting all of these cases. What she got was, the tiniest of slaps on the wrist. She should have been down for 10 years or more. This could be, oppression of an inmate. Now, I understand that probably where they were worried that they were going to come into some problems would be with, any testimony that was going to be provided by her or by the inmates, where it did make it look like a consensual thing. And you never know for sure what kind of jury that you're going to get. But it's horrible. We need better background investigations. We need people that are more motivated to do a more professional job. And we need to cut all of this deadwood loose.
Yeah, guys. So let me just talk, because there's a couple of good comments. I know she's attractive. Could that be a concern when someone's hired? Let me tell you something. There's a lot of attractive people that work in the system. I mean, you'll see some females or even some males, some model. They have Instagram pages, again, but when they're behind that wall, there's a level of professionalism that really supersedes the physical, literally. And literally it's their actions as well. When you work in a prison or a jail, the one thing, guys, is you can't allow an inmate to compliment you. How crazy is that? But it's true. An inmate compliments you. How you react to that compliment could open the door, and that could happen. I mean, I don't know too much about how this all started. But you look at a woman like this who, it's intentional behavior. She cut a hole in her pants. So she can't, say that, oh, I don't know what I was thinking. No, you knew what you were thinking because you went home, you cut a hole in your pants, and you came to work knowing that this relationship was happening. This could be a woman that is in herself a female sexual aggressor. I mean, I'm just saying, having sex with in front of 11 other inmates, and I think Duty Ron said it probably wasn't her first time. I kind of have to agree with that because of how open she is with what she was doing. But you want to hear something funny? You could have a woman that is that good looking, but still have low self-esteem. And the inmates play into that because, again, the inmates give the woman the attention that she wants. And again, it could go both ways, but we're talking about the woman at this point, and they give that woman the attention. So that woman wants that attention. And now what happens here when she goes back into that correctional facility, she's all dialed up and it probably all started based on that one compliment. The inmate said, I have a pretty face or whatever it is. And next thing you know, instead of her addressing it, and what I mean by addressing it, guys, I mean literally you tell the inmate, you put the inmate right in their place. It's not ignoring the comment because that just invites it. And I'm going to tell you something else too, guys. Once you allow that first comment to come in, it opens up the door for the other compliments to start coming in. Like Dave Ash said to Joyce Mitchell at Clinton. And I want to tell you something, guys. There's a difference in the game of manipulation when it comes to the gender being targeted. So in my book, I think it's chapter 7, we talk about how manipulation can happen. First, we talk about a male to female, and then we talk about a female to male. So a male officer to a female inmate, and then a female officer to a male inmate. So I want to stay with the female first. So again, guys, nothing's 100%. So I want you guys to know that. But for the most part, in my experience, and I'm sure Russ will comment too right after this, is that one thing with male inmates, when they're trying to push onto our female officers, they want to put the female officer into some level of obligation and trust. Okay, so they have done things where they'll walk up to the officer or up to the staff member, it doesn't have to be just the officer, or up to the staff member and say, hey, you have any concerns in this unit? I got you. You have any issues? I got you. Now, sometimes people will be like, oh, that's great. The inmate's got your back. That's not what it's about, guys. It's about, I got you. Like, basically, you don't have to go to your peers. You don't have to go to the people you should be going to. You go to me. So what does that show? One thing is the inmate already has power over you the moment you accept that offer. The second thing is what else it tells. It also says that you're not going to go to your peers when you're in trouble. You trust the inmates more the moment you accept this, right? And then there's that feeling of obligation. The fact that eventually I have to pay you back. That's why if you have an inmate that saves an officer's life, we may be quick to send that inmate out, maybe at a different facility. Because if you don't, you have an officer right now that may feel that they have to pay that inmate back. And you don't know, maybe it was a setup. You don't know. You don't know if this inmate really saved this officer's life or if it was a setup so the inmate can then put that officer in some fine level of obligation, that feeling that has to be paid back. And one other thing too, when it comes to the gender part of manipulation, when you have a female officer or a female staff member that's being targeted by a male inmate, sometimes the female staff member may allow some level of protection from that male inmate. And in return, she gives them that level of trust. Where the male, it's a little bit different. If it's a male officer that's being turned by a female inmate, the female inmate's not going to offer some level of protection because men are like, I'm not, what do you mean? You're not going to be able to protect me. I'm not going for that. What they do is they make it look like the male officer is in control, that at any time, don't worry, no one's going to know about this and I got this. And, basically they give that level of control over to that male officer. And one last thing, guys, when you get staff that say, well, I would never mess with an inmate because it's not worth losing my job or going to jail. Those are external reasons. Those aren't the staff that make it that long because the inmates are able to minimize those consequences by building a trust with that officer, trust with that staff member. So the staff doesn't see the consequences, right? But technically you want the staff that says, I'm not going to do that because in the end, it's about my moral responsibility, about my character, about my professionalism. Those are more internal. But I promise you, if anybody that comes into this profession, for, to do the job, and in order for them to not do something wrong, they base it on some form of external incentive, like, again, I'm not going to jail, or, this person is not worth getting in trouble for. When they meet that right inmate, and that inmate's able to smooth talk their way through that person and minimize those consequences to the point where the person is now thinking, well, you know what, maybe this could happen, because, maybe I won't get in trouble. Well, now you start being able to turn that staff member, and guys, it's slow and subtle. It's very slow and subtle. What's your thoughts, Russ?
Yeah, all of that's exactly right. But you know what? The one thing that we really need to keep in mind is just because you're not corrupted, to that far extent where you're having sex with an inmate, doesn't mean that you're not necessarily being manipulated and that they're not getting away with things. And that's one of the reasons that I took things like, approaching, or, or catcalling, or anything, any of our female staff very seriously, is because we want to make sure that everyone understands, from the officer to the inmates, that there's teams here, right? And those teams are, you guys, and then there's us. And, I know people don't want to put those labels on, but it's important that we stay within our professional bounds. And so when you look at that, you have to absolutely give your female staff the backing that they need, that they're not reliant on having inmates stop things, even if it sounds minor, like catcalling or something like that. Because it just seems like, oh, well, you know what, that just makes it easier. Well, you know what? It makes it easier to overlook some contraband, not serious contraband, but then the next time, overlooking a little more serious contraband. And pretty soon it's on that slippery slope. And that doesn't mean that that person is going to necessarily be so compromised they're going over to the other side. It just means that their job has become such a burden that they feel that the only way they can deal with it is by dealing through the inmates instead of through staff. And we should be the ones going through there, and we should be presenting a united front, no gaps between us. And when there's problems, when there's issues, we should be putting those things down.
Yeah, and Lola, I got a couple of things I want to. You guys, some very good questions coming in, so I definitely want to hit up a couple of those. So one thing real quick, guys, is we talked about the slippery slope. So one thing is, as an officer, if you're working in the correction system, you don't want to be isolated from your support staff. So the inmates that look to manipulate, they're going to try to isolate you, and they're going to also try to pull you from your prescribed role. They don't want you to see them as an inmate. So again, they're going to try to pull you away from that through anything personal, most likely your mother, however they can connect and pull you out of that prescribed role. And they also, as I said, they want to isolate you. So remember when I told you the inmate said, hey, I can protect you, I got you? Well, when the inmate says that, he's also saying that your peers can't do it. And then what happens is, when there's a concern, where are you going? You're looking towards the inmate. I used to remember staff that would say, hey, Gange, I'm good. If I have any concerns, this inmate usually handles it for me. Whoa, slow down. Because now you're giving the control over to the inmate. You're also giving the power over to the inmate. That's one thing. And there's that level of obligation. What happens when you have to write that inmate up or charge that inmate? You're going to be thinking twice about doing that. Again, that's why we have to be careful about that feeling of obligation, because it can make us ineffective. And I like what Lola said, 100%. It's like a role reversal. I'm accepting that inmate's offer to help, but I'm accepting that offer to help to protect and control. That's my job. That's my job. That's not their job. And I want to mention something, because you asked a very good question. I'll start with this, and maybe Russ could attack this too. How will the inmate be disciplined in the case of Tina Gonzalez? Will he be disciplined for contraband only, but the sex he did was him being raped since he couldn't consent, so he won't be charged? This is your question was very informative here, because obviously you definitely picked up on something when you asked this question. So you're 100% right. We have a victim here. So that beautiful girl that I just showed you a couple of seconds ago? Technically, she is a sex offender now, right? She raped an inmate. So guess what, guys? That inmate that she raped is a victim. Now, what's funny is a lot of these things, it's hard for them to take it to trial, because when they take it to trial, a lot of people won't believe that a female like that had the ability to rape a male inmate. Now, the funny thing is, when you have the males making, the male, let's say a male officer rapes a female inmate, that's going to go far. Because in the end, the perspective is going to be, yeah, we believe that we could take this far because obviously this male could definitely overpower this woman. Again, it's about that perspective. It's tougher for these cases when you have a female officer doing it, because when it goes to court, it's hard for the people to think that this female could overpower this male inmate. But technically, the male inmate is a victim. But I will say this. Now that the case is done, I don't know if the inmate got in trouble or not. I'm not too, but most likely the contraband and the inmate is what's needed to flip and go against her. So I'm sure that the investigative division, the authorities that were investigating the Priya concern, would probably be using the contraband and, again, the sexual acts, whatever they could, to get the inmate to flip against the officer. So I don't know necessarily if the inmate would directly get in trouble if that's the leverage. So if I'm the investigator, I'm going to say, listen, you got caught with all this contraband. Now, mind you, here's the funny thing, guys. Here's the funny thing. If the officer is having sex and the officer is bringing in the contraband, I want you to know something. The officer is not the one in control here. It's the inmate that's in control. But now it's about getting the officer, because the officer poses the greatest risk, because she's someone we trust that now has been tainted and manipulated. But at all times, don't think it's not the inmate that's in control. The inmate's in control of this. But in order to get this slam dunk case, I could picture the investigative authorities using some leverage and, yeah, we could get you for this, but instead what we're going to do is this, and this. And most likely the reason why I thought maybe some of that may have been thrown out is because it looks like she should have gotten more time for introducing the contraband, and she didn't. But what's your thoughts, Russ?
Yeah, well, just imagine that you're the inmate, and this has been happening now. She's been caught. You've been found with this contraband. What are you going to say, right? And it's pretty obvious. You're going to say, well, you know what? She was forcing me into having sex. And, the only thing that I knew to do was go along with it. And then she said she wanted to bring in contraband and she wanted some money in exchange for that. And I was completely out of control. I mean, is this all probably a bunch of hooey? Yeah. But what are you going to do? You're going to have that introduced. And then, we got this thing that, it bites both ways, called reasonable doubt. So are you going to, if you're a prosecuting attorney, do you want that being seen by the jury and your chances of, actually coming up with getting him for something? That's not to say it's insurmountable, but that's a pretty steep hill to be climbing on, I think.
Yeah. And Lola, she should be a sex offender. And she should be, I'm assuming Megan's Law, whatever it is. I mean, she committed a felony. She violated a Priya, she violated Priya. So with that said, she's going to have to, she can never work in the jail system again. I don't know if she has to register or whatnot, how far that goes, but she can definitely never come into any law enforcement position, because again, she was given a position of authority and she violated that trust. And the funny thing is, you want to hear something funny, guys? When we see the picture of her, that officer, again, a beautiful woman, and she gets caught up by this, with this inmate and has sex, a lot of us don't take it as serious as we would if it was a male officer doing it to a female inmate. Just as bad, guys, believe it or not, because even if you guys don't want to look at the rape aspect, which is just as bad, because again, they're in a position of authority, they did something wrong, but the fact is also it corrupts the system. Dr. Z said something, minor contraband one day, a weapon the next. For those on the outside looking in, the biggest concern we have are inmates that are able to slowly mind game, staff, to the point where staff starts going down these wrong paths step by step, and then eventually they start with this small bits of contraband, but then eventually, like Dr. Z said, could be a weapon, could be something to plan an escape. And guys, this doesn't have to be a one-day interaction. You're talking about relationships that could take years to develop. And then at one point, the staff member, their loyalty is not towards this facility anymore or us. They fell in love with the inmate. One of the biggest threats that I guess we have is really if staff develop that relationship that really supersedes their logic and their level of responsibility to their position. And
Look, look what happened with Joyce Mitchell. I mean, that was months and months, and ended up in a huge prison break. So
yeah, I like this. She said, "Wow, it's not fair that she got a light sentence. Though, if a male did that, he would be crucified." I agree, but it's based on how we view it. The funny thing is, as I said, we would view it as less severe because it's a woman to a male, because we don't think that the male was a victim, because it's hard for us to picture the woman holding him down and raping him. But having said that, you could easily picture that with a male on a female inmate. So it really is about that perspective and how we see it. But can I tell you something? In this world, it's both the same. The rape of an inmate, male or female, should carry those same consequences. And that judge who did this really should have looked at it from a bigger picture. He set nothing up to deter anybody else from doing it again. That slap of the wrist is unacceptable in this profession, because the one thing that we have, and again, it shouldn't, when you do this job, you do it for the right reasons, but there are going to be some that make it through that really fall on that external incentive. Like, I'm not going to do nothing wrong because I'm not going to go to jail, or, I'm not going to lose my job. It's a very weak incentive to, navigate yourself through this profession. But having said that, it people do. And with that said, once you start minimizing those consequences, those people start taking those risks, because again, there's nothing to stop them. Now, for the people that remain to do their job, it doesn't matter what the consequences are, because at the end, I know what my role is. I know what my job is. I know what I'm supposed to do. So it doesn't matter about the consequence, because at the end of the day, even if she got nothing, that's not going to stop me from doing my job and being professional. But there are going to be some that are going to look at that and say, wow, she got nothing. And what does that do, Judge? It opens up the doors for other people to then take the jump. Because again, if you minimize the consequence to these actions, then there are going to be people that, instead of thinking, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to get caught, they shift their mindset to how can I do it and not get caught. You see how the shift goes? You see what happens when, if it's the consequences in play, you don't want to get caught, right? So at the end of the day, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to get caught. But when you minimize the consequences, your mindset starts to shift, like, well, maybe I could do it at this time or over here because no one's going to see me. Once your mindset starts to shift in that way, you've already been corrupted. A quick story, if I may, Russ. Oh, wait. Go ahead, Russ. I know you got a thought. Go ahead. You want to go first?
Oh no, I was following you there. I was just thinking, it's because of what Lola said about it being unfair, and yeah, but you know what, we have to try and find that standard. We have to find, that level, and we have to try and keep everybody in line and on the same page. And it's not easy when we have this kind of cognitive dissonance with judges like this that minimize everything.
Yeah, I want to mention something, guys, real quick, because again, I have a book out there, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. It's the book covers this, but I want to mention something. So a while ago, I was on CNN. We talked about the Joyce Mitchell. I had Anderson Cooper on, and one of the things I hate hearing is when a staff member says, "I know about it," or "I figured this was happening," but they didn't do nothing about it because they didn't act on that feeling, which is foolish. I mean, technically, that feeling's based on experience. It's based on, our dealings behind that wall. So you have to listen to that gut. But I want to mention something. And by the way, when some people say, how did the other officers not know about this? The professional officers, by them being professional, deters negative actions from others. So, if they're professional in their manner and they carry themselves the correct way, the people that are doing corrupt shit won't do it in front of them. I know an officer at the beginning, right at the academy, guys, he stood up and said, if you officers think about ever doing anything stupid, I'm going to report you. And you know what that did, guys? Now, as much as people want to say something, let me tell you something. As this person went through the academy and then went through his days working in corrections, the rumor spread about him, about what he said. And it automatically connected him to like-minded people. There were people that avoided him, but then why? Why are you avoiding him? Like, it doesn't make any sense, because I would like to think you would do the same thing. But he connected himself to really good professional people along the way. He's a supervisor. He's very well respected right now. So again, like-minded people connected to like-minded people right from the get-go. So usually if you have an area, let's say you have two officers working together and there is one officer that's being foolish, most likely they're being foolish only when they're working with this other officer or this other staff member. And then you have to start checking out the other staff member. That's why when you're doing these investigations, the first thing you go after is, did this officer have a partner? Did this officer work with anybody? You know, did they work with anybody 7 days a week? I mean, what's going on? I mean, because if that's the case, how did the partner not know? I got a funny story I want to share, guys. I think that you would find interesting. Yeah, and her having sex in front of 11 other inmates. I mean, that itself is. But check this out, guys. I think you'll find this interesting. A while ago, I worked with an officer who, good officer, very, very professional officer. And as we worked together, he would kind of tell me, it'd be foolish to do something with these female inmates. And it's like, okay, I get it. And he would just talk about it all the time. And it's like, okay, I get it. Of course it's going to be foolish. But why is it foolish? Like, just tell me more about it. So he'd go right to the external incentives, not getting caught, not going to jail. I said, but what about who you are, the trusted, like, what about if those consequences didn't exist? If those consequences didn't exist, would you still think it's a foolish thing? And of course, there's that mindset now starting to shift. And then eventually, as we started talking, his mindset starts to shift of, about, what, if I wanted to do something foolish, these are the ways I could do it. It's like, what do you mean? He goes, well, I could do it here, 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 or when the supervisor comes, once they leave, I can probably do it at this point, this point, this point. I said, you spend a big portion of your day figuring out, how not to get caught. Catch yourself. You're spending a lot of part of your day figuring out all these different ways to not do this foolish thing or to do this foolish thing and not get caught. The mindset starts to shift. So when they feel that there is no consequence for their actions, all of a sudden those thoughts start to come out in fruition. So if you get that right inmate that's able to manipulate that game and say, you can trust me, I'll never tell on you, you'll never get caught. And all of a sudden this person starts to believe in that, the consequences get minimized, and now you have nothing stopping that officer from doing anything foolish. And in the long run, it's not just about the ultimate act. It's not just about the relationship. It's about the outcome of that relationship that puts a threat to the safety and security of the facility. What's your thoughts, Russ, on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What the easiest way to not get caught is not to do anything wrong. And for someone to be spending that much time, they're thinking about it. They're on the path. This guy that you're talking about, he was on the path to doing something wrong, and whether he did or not, I don't know. But I can tell you right now, if you're worried about getting caught and you haven't done anything, the train's about to hit you at some point. There's no doubt about that. The thing that you want to do is you want to develop the job and the career that you've chosen in the best way possible, which doesn't include any of this stuff that we're talking about. You need to be so far above that it doesn't even enter your mind.
Yeah, guys. So great question from Dawn. Do lifers or death row inmates get conjugal visits? I mean, it really does depend on the facility. I would say a lot of us have done away with a lot of it. I know that for female inmates, it's tough because the last thing you want is for that female to get pregnant and now the state's taking care of the baby. But I believe there are some states that still do conjugal visits. Russ, does California still have them?
California has them, but not for lifers and not for death row inmates. You have to, and then there's a whole assortment, really,
I lost you, Russ.
Of things that you can and can't be, arrested for or convicted of that would stop you from having those. And you have to, first of all, you have to be married to the person. You can't have any domestic violence. And so the number of people that actually transact within the conjugal visit thing is fairly minimal, because most of the time these guys have done some bad things and they're not eligible. But like every other thing happening now, everything's being minimized, everything's being, relegated and made relative to something else. And so I'm not really sure just, how far down the rabbit hole it goes now with regards to these guys being able to get those types of visits.
I have a unique question, actually, and it's not here, it's just on my mind now, because obviously we did talk about men. I wonder if there's any female facilities that allow conjugal visits. I'm going to assume no, because if the female gets pregnant, obviously we have a big concern with who's going to, take care of that baby. But do you know of any jails or prisons that allow female conjugal visits?
Every one of them in California.
Really?
Yeah, you can't develop a policy that's good for the goose but not good for the gander, right? So and so that's the way it breaks down.
Wow. Like, and want to hear something funny, guys? Priya, a lot of stuff with Priya, they cover, they also touch on the transgender issues, and you'll see a lot of movement, right, to protect a transgender female. So that's a male becoming a female. And they'll do whatever they can there's our movements now to put the transgender female, again, male becoming a female, into a female facility. But the funny thing is, you don't see the reverse. There's a lot of transgender males. So you got transgender female becoming a male, and we don't see any efforts of putting those females into male facilities. So, I know Russ kind of made me think of that when you said what's good for the goose is good for the gander, but that seems to be a very hot topic lately. But Russ, have you ever seen an effort of a transgender, so female becoming a male, and them trying to push her into a male facility?
What I tend to see, and because I'm retired and stuff now, but the conversations that I have is, first of all, is you have this whole big transgender umbrella, and transgender is something completely and entirely different from transsexual. So there's a lot of guys out there that are trying to game the system, under the umbrella of of transgender, because transgender just means you're saying or you're claiming an identity. So transsexual means that you're at least starting the shots, of some hormones and things like that, and you're in the process of getting some sort of surgery. So it's a whole different issue. So that's why we have to be careful with respect to these things and make sure that when we're using this terminology, transgender, that just means that somebody has made a claim. And it really is bad. We see a lot of disparity, because when someone that's, going from a woman to a man, you're right. That's a completely different ball game, and we don't hear much about it, even though that person stands a substantially higher likelihood of being victimized or being a victimizer if they move across to to a different type of housing. So
yeah. And hey guys, real quick about the what was that good question with corruption? So I want to mention something, guys. When a staff member gets corrupted, the inmate is in control. 100%. And sometimes what happens is, I think it was Lola that mentioned before about the discipline. There is a game being played both ways, but unfortunately with this woman here, I don't think there was much manipulation involved in that. I really don't. I think this woman came in with a unique purpose. I'm going to go in and, whether she had low self-esteem, loved the attention, and just went with it. I mean, again, getting screwed in front of 11 inmates. I mean, that's pretty unique. But I think that this woman was never professional to begin with. But I want you to know. So here's the funny thing. So during that game of manipulation, we know it's slow and subtle. It's a very advanced game. Inmates still have access to a lot of books, outside, contact. They can watch TV. They get education. So, I mean, they know how to maneuver. They know body language. They know what to say. I mean, a lot of them are very smooth talkers. I would love to see who the inmate was that she was caught up with. It probably wouldn't be the best looking of men. It would just be someone that probably knows how to communicate. Now, this woman could have came in with some type of low level self-esteem, and he knew how to build her up. And again, all because you see a good looking woman on the surface doesn't mean she feels good looking on the inside. I mean, again, or some of them just like that constant, appreciation. But with that said, the inmate, when you get a staff member that does develop a relationship, and obviously the end result is bringing in that contraband, obviously the inmate is in control of that. But the inmate is not going to be the one that gets in trouble for it. They may get caught, but that becomes the negotiation. That becomes the leverage that will be needed by the agency to really make it go back on the officer. The inmate is doing what inmates do. That's what they do. And most of the time, as you go to try to push up like cell phones and stuff like that, sometimes prosecutors will take it. Sometimes they won't. Depends on how busy the county is or this, whatever. Depends on how busy they are. If they're really busy, prosecutors are like, you know what? It's another day in the park. Institution will handle it. But if it's a slower, if it's a slower county, then they may have time to say, we're going to go balls to the wall on this. We're going to go all out. So it really is subjective based on the county. But sometimes the sad thing is the inmate's responsibility gets minimized because that inmate winds up being the leverage for the greater concern. The greater concern is, okay, this inmate got the contraband, but who gave them the contraband? Oh, it was this staff member, and we need to get this staff member. So the inmate could get some form of discipline, but I'll guarantee you the greater leverage is not writing the inmate up. It's rather turning the inmate around and getting them to now say, this is who brought it in and this is how I got it. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, just to give people an idea, in case some of you out there don't already know this, for these guys that are, doing this time, whether it's in a jail or a prison, going to jail and going to prison doesn't faze them at all. As a matter of fact, often that's their base of operation. So, someone looking to, have a significant conduit open up for them inside a prison where they have access to a lot of drugs is just a way for them to make money. There's people all the time that get caught on purpose or turn themselves in on purpose that are carrying significant amounts of contraband into the prison. And there's also a significant effort through, actual, organized crime syndicates, which are your STGs, all of these gangs and stuff. And they're actively looking to try and co-opt and corrupt staff. They're looking for new ways to, find new conduits into the prison, and they want to go there and be there to run that part of their operation. So don't think that jail or prison is necessarily a negative for these guys. They're actively trying to operate within that environment because it can be so lucrative for them in two forms. One, they can make a lot of money there, and also they can consolidate a lot of power within that prison gang structure. So, don't think that maybe this wasn't the plan from the get-go. We may never know for sure. It depends on how much in depth they got into that investigation. So don't discount that angle of it out either.
Yeah, guys, let me send love to the Duty Ron family. It looks like they're all over here right now. So love you guys. I got New Zealand Mysteries, Dawn Marie, Lola, Black Rose. Definitely some familiar faces when I was there a couple of days ago. We were talking about the Chris Watts. If you guys have any questions about the discussion that we have Russ, we have another perspective. He may not have worked at Dodge Correctional, but guys, dealing with the high profile inmates really doesn't change much. I mean, I remember even the biggest thing for me when it comes to dealing with high profile inmates is obviously there's going to be more attention on that facility than ever before because of they're following this one person, they're interested. So right off the bat, or because the person gets convicted, the story doesn't die. They want to know how their stay is and what's going on. So you're definitely put in the spotlight immediately. I think the biggest concern for me when dealing with a high profile inmate, thanks Lola, is having to protect that inmate. Because if you get a high profile crime, and what I mean by that is a crime that's heinous, maybe a child killer or something like that, or a sex offender, and the news is putting it all out there for everyone to see. Now we have to protect that person behind the wall, and it becomes so hard because inmates have access to TVs and articles, or they can just call their families. And so I think right off the bat, the best way to do it is to put that inmate in some form of protective custody. But I was telling Russ a while back, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Russ, is that when the case starts to die down, let's say the person's already been sentenced, so they're at the prison level now, and eventually you do want to try to introduce this person. Hey, what's up, 12-step? You want to introduce this person back to general population, and everything's going good, and you start ready to, okay, let's start moving this person forward, because it costs a lot of money to keep someone there. So you think, okay, the case is slowed down, let's go ahead and start moving forward. All of a sudden, a Lifetime special airs. A random Lifetime special comes out about 5 or 10 years later about this whole scenario, and next thing you know, it's like, hey, hold on, bring that person back in. Lifetime did not even give us the courtesy to tell us that they were. I wish the media would do that. I wish they would say, hey, where's this person housed? let's call, and before we make a movie about this or before we tell the whole world, let's just make sure that they're aware. And if they have any concerns, they can let us know. Hey, Russ, you think Lifetime would call your facility to say, hey, we're writing a movie about one of your inmates?
Oh, hell no, man. If something bad happened, that would just mean that they could sell more, ad time or something like that. And that's a pretty jaundiced and cynical view, but I believe it to be true. And we're right now, just talking about high-profile inmates. Well, don't forget that there's a lot of high-profile people that have loved ones in the facilities too. And so I never really saw in those cases where where people got special treatment or they were housed differently. But we had Stacey Ogman's brother from the Atlanta Hawks at a facility that I was at. We had Danny Glover's brother. We had Ricky Henderson's brother at one time, and they were all just in general population. And there's a lot more that I can't even remember right now, but it gives you an idea. It's not limited to just a heinous crime or someone who's famous. That can include their families as well.
Yeah, and Lola said that's crazy. They should give a heads up. Maybe it's why. Oh, thanks, Black Rose. She said great information. Maybe that's why we do shows like this, because maybe there'll be somebody from the media, because we all could trust the media, and maybe no, wait, hold on. Let me live in a good world right now, Russ. Hear me out, guys. This is totally probably never going to happen, but let me live in this world because look, guys, it's beautiful out. Let me live in this world where the media will say, you know what? We could possibly make $300 million on airing this latest special about whatever Chris Watts. But before we go to make that money, let's make sure the correctional officers are okay, that they could do their job. And if they can't do their job, then we don't make that $300 million off that Lifetime special. Is that a world that we will see, Russ, soon?
Never, ever. Not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime, not in anyone's lifetime. And that's probably about all I should say at the media right at this point.
Oh, man. Hey, guys, if you think that's possible, just, let us know. Do you think the media would ever sacrifice whatever it is, maybe attention, whatever it is, to help us? By just all they got to do is give us the heads up. That's all I'm asking, But in the long run, dealing with high-profile inmates, it's tough, but you always have to remember they're an inmate. That's all it is. The sad thing is when those inmates come in so famous, you're going to have another inmate that's going to want to connect to that level of fame, whether it's, taking the inmate out, like literally, if it's like a child sex offender, you could have an inmate that's going to say, I'm going to redeem myself. I'm going to kill this guy. Or, maybe they just connect and they try to, they know this person has money. Could be, you never know. However, they're high profile, and they start oppressing the inmate. So every time we have a high profile inmate, it's very good for us to kind of know, why they're so high profile. And again, as staff members, we are objective. We know what their crimes are, and we're still able to be professional and do our jobs. I remember a while ago, someone said, I had to deal with obviously where I work, we do deal with pedophiles and sex offenders. And someone said, if you have to give the inmates what they're supposed to get. It is what it is. That's our job. And I remember doing a show one time, and it says, well, how can you give them, these things that they're supposed to get? By the way, they're supposed to get it. And I'm not giving them anything extra, just what they're supposed to get. Don't you have children of your own? I said, yeah, I have two. Well, what would you do if that was your children that was assaulted or sexually assaulted? I said, but those weren't my children. And if they were, I wouldn't be overseeing him. I wouldn't be able to. But right now I'm being paid to oversee this person in an objective and fair manner. But God forbid it was my children, then I would immediately remove myself from it. I'd have to because of the greater conflict. But that's one of the hardest parts about working in corrections is knowing what they've done and having to do your job without generalizing animosity because maybe you're connected to it and somehow. Again, still something that's hard to do, but you do it because it has to be done. It makes it even harder. And I'm sure Russ could tell you this, when you have someone that's in for such a heinous crime and they also feel that they have a level of entitlement. Now it makes you hard not to separate. Like, you ever have that, Russ, like someone that has a heinous crime and they're entitled?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One that comes to mind is, we had the founder of the Crips, Tookie Williams, in there, and so the infamy of his crimes, the infamy of himself being the founder of the Crips and stuff. It wasn't a detriment to him. For him, it was an entitlement to everything he thought that he could squeeze out of it. And so, there was no speed bump there at all. The only thing that really slowed him down is he was kept in, some pretty restrictive housing because of that, and because of him being on death row at the same time. So,
Hey, Russ, I want Duty Ron asked a good question. I thought maybe both of us can tackle, but I'll have you go first if you don't mind. Anthony, or guest, how long does a high profile inmate last in PC, or is it decision made based on the situation it's inside?
uh, well, that's kind of a complex question, but if that person is in there for the infamy of their crime, so to speak, and that crime had a facet of a particular victimology where the person was, super vulnerable, like a child or elder or something like that, then they tend to spend their entire sentence in that kind of facility that can cater to them and keep them safe, and they tend to be amongst their own type in there. It's getting very complex within the California system, because we used to have these SNY yards, which stood for sensitive needs, and now they've been breaking that down. I don't even fully understand what it is that they're doing right now. I probably need to take a few lessons and so forth. But for the most part, they're going to be in there because everyone knows who they are. And in this day and age, it's really, really easy to have somebody Googled, or to Google it yourself with a phone that's been smuggled in or something like that. So for the most part, those people are immediately separated. Now, some people with some common names, and if they don't know exactly where they're from, some of those people tend to skate by, but then that's not a case where there's actually any, high profile, any infamy, any nefariousness or notoriousness attached.
Yeah, and don't forget, Duty Ron, to also, when they make that decision to release that person from PC, I would like to think it would be an investigative decision signed off by the administrator. But if it's really high level, it could go executive. It could go way high up there, but someone's name is going to be behind it. So I can guarantee you a lot of these guys may even get lost in PC because no one wants to put their name on moving that person forward. Now, granted, there always should be an effort to push that person into general population. But like Russ said, the ones that you have the greatest concern for are the ones that one could be oppressed because they're, very successful, have a lot of money, maybe big in the music industry, whatnot, or it could have they can have a negative influence on the inmate population. So again, you could have people that have that power, like Russ said, Tukey, a high level gang member who could have a negative influence on the population. But the other concern is going to be is that retaliatory aspect. Somewhere along the line, our concern is, yeah, I know maybe the case isn't as trending as it was, but the person still did this, and this, and maybe I just rather just let this person ride it out in PC because of the liability. Because in the end, if something happens to that person, everybody's name on it, it's just they're gonna have to really explain, well, why did you do it? Why was that person released? And it's, well, want to get them into GP, but that's not going to be good enough because, go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I'll tell you too. It's it doesn't really even happen at that level at least in California, because it doesn't really matter whether the case was had any fame or infamy attached to it, because what happens is these STG gangs are just they're running completely off the hook, and so somebody new shows up on a yard and somebody doesn't know them, that paperwork is being checked. And if that paperwork isn't tight by whatever their standards are, by those internal prison politics, that person's going to be attacked and probably stabbed and run off the yard, just for not even necessarily knowing what he's about, just because they're worried that he is a potential sex offender, or someone who was a snitch in some other case or something like that. So it doesn't have to even go that far for these people to end up in a PC unit and spend their entire sentence there. It happens all the time. I mean, I literally know of hundreds of cases. And I know lots of cases where guys just showed up on the yard, and because they didn't have their paperwork and something smelled fishy, they were immediately removed through physical assault.
Guys, there's a lot of good questions here, Russ. We have to speed through some of these.
Okay, let's start hammering them out.
All right, there's a lot of good ones. Guys, by the way, guys, all your questions have value. If I miss it, please don't take it the wrong way. Email me or Russ. My email is gangianthony@yahoo.com. If you figure there's a question we didn't get to, we'll devote a whole show to it. That's who we are. And Russ, what's your email?
My email is sierra.sargent@gmail.com.
Yeah, so guys, this is if we miss something, we'll devote a whole show. That's just how we do, because our we're into educating and informing. I know we could speed through this one real quick. I forgot. I think it was Lola. She asked, "Is there a weight limit for cells or bigger cells for bigger people?" I mean, cells are usually going to be like a standard size. If there's an inmate that's really big and it becomes uncomfortable for another inmate to live in that space, I'm sure you could request a single cell only. But having said that, you're going to have to get that inmate, obviously, I'm sure medical will try to work with them to try to bring their weight down, because you also have a greater health concern. But I've seen some bigger inmates have to sell in with some smaller inmates. The other concern here, too, is if you have a big inmate like this, you got to be careful who you sell them with, because they could be very big individuals that can oppress a smaller inmate. So a lot of things go into play when it comes to safety and security as well. But most likely, if it becomes tough for another inmate to be housed with them because of the guy's size, you could recommend for this person to be placed in a single cell or a bigger cell. But I've seen inmates that were pretty big that, it would be very tough for them to be housed with somebody. So that order could be definitely done single cell. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we take into account when we're doing housing and classification like that. If it's possible, you want some equality between the two inmates with respect to size, in case there is a problem. But I have seen some morbidly obese individuals that there was just no way to put them in a cell with someone else, because they could barely turn around. But fortunately, that's kind of, I would say, fairly rare.
Yeah, and shout out Wild Bill YouTube Network, WBYTN. What's up, Wild Bill? A lot of love from Duty Ron. I want to get to Leon. Leon asked a good question. I think it's a good question. Where is he? Anthony, this is Leon from Baltimore. I have a question for you guys. Have you ever worked in a processing unit and had inmates with the same name and accidentally released them? Yeah. All right. So I haven't dealt with it. And to be honest with you, I'm going to, Leon, I don't want to be harsh on this. By the way, I love Leon, by the way. Leon's been with us that's Leon. Leon's our boy, Russ. You know him. I'll show you who he is later. It's kind of unforgivable for me, and I'll tell you why. There are so many fail safes put in play for erroneous releases, including that, because there's so many other ways besides their name that they get identified by, which includes their picture, plus their birth date, how old they are, their social security number. You're going through a list of checkpoints and you're asking the inmate these questions. You're going straight down the list. And also, the inmate has to get ID'd multiple times before they leave. So the reason why, to me, it becomes unforgivable is there's some level of failure there in regarding to IDing who this inmate is. But here's another thing, guys. You just gave this inmate someone else's paperwork. That to me is the biggest concern. You gave this inmate whatever's left in their account to somebody else, connections that they need to have when they get released, whatever it is that you were planning for this inmate to have a successful release. So to me, I just think that there's too many fail safes involved. And I will tell you one thing. The reason why I think a lot of this happens, and it's going to go back to Russ, who's definitely going to kick on this, is complacency. But you're talking about a higher level complacency. You're not talking about just the person IDing the individual, because again, this person gets ID'd from, I would like to hope, a supervisor before they get released, but then they have to go through the checkpoints before they get exit. Now, the sad thing is we're all supposed to have each other's back. So if I'm the supervisor and let's just say, okay, I ID'd this guy and I said they're good to go, I'm okay with the officer making sure it's the right ID behind me. And I'm okay with another officer doing it. All because I'm the supervisor, guys. I'm not perfect. Help me out. help me out. But they may say, well, Ganji checked him, so we know he's good. We don't. No, 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 no. You keep on checking that person until they get to that final out. So I don't know. I just think there's too many things involved in that process for those type of releases to happen. I mean, I figured the moment it happened the very first time, you would develop these plans for it to never happen again. I just think it's something that we should be far past. What's your thoughts? Do you think complacency usually involves that? Is involved in that, Russ?
Yeah, people just get people just get tired, and they're used to the process, and they don't think it's ever going to happen in the way that it ends up happening, whatever that is. And then God forbid, then there's a newspaper article and the nightly news doing that. I remember I used to have to release these guys all the time, and they would come in, and man, the first thing is if they did not look like that picture, man, I'll tell you what. Then it was the third degree, and taking a new picture and all this stuff, and asking them about names and addresses in the file, and making absolutely sure. And the thing that really pissed me off is here we're running a multi-million-dollar facility in a multi-billion-dollar department, and we can't afford to have a fingerprint scanner back in receiving and release. I was like, oh my, what really is going on, where you can't take that bit of money in order to assure that public safety is bolstered?
Yeah, and I think the normal prison cell size may be 6 by 8. I'm thinking 6 feet width and then 8 feet long. I mean, obviously, some higher profile inmates that are more in an isolated confinement area, they could get cells that are a little bit bigger. I mean, next time, guys, when we do a show next time, we could even, since I have people from the outside looking in, let's talk about the truth behind solitary confinement. I know it's too much to get into now, but if you guys remind me about that, let's talk about that, because I would love to hit it and let you guys see it from our perspective on the inside out, because we could talk about what it really is and how politics have kind of just, they use the word solitary confinement, but guys, it's not solitary. And we'll explain that maybe for the next episode. But there's two more questions I wanted to get to. I think one is from Lola. No, not Lola. I apologize. One is from Black Rose. Black Rose says, do inmates get treated better in PC? Go ahead, Russ. You want to attack that first?
It's kind of subjective. PC just means that it's a unit where you have where the STGs that tend to run it are more along the lines of getting along and stuff. So those STGs aren't necessarily weeding people out, or they couldn't be there either, because they're typically gang dropouts. So I would say that there tends to be a lower level of violence, and whether or not you would consider that being treated better, I don't know. There's standard things that you can get in canteen. There's standard items you can have in your cell. There's a standardized list of what programs are supposed to be available to you. So I don't really, or at least I don't really see where being PC has a distinct advantage, other than it protects you some ways physically, and in some ways in a way from the notoriety or your crime coming back to haunt you, and violence being visited upon you. Other than that, I would say things are pretty much the same.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, really, you can have all consistent policies, but it's really up to the officer that runs it. How consistent are they really keeping it? I mean, I would like to think policies should be consistent, the same as GP. I mean, some cases people actually think PC may be a little bit more severe. That's why we said, oh, don't worry, when they're in PC, they're getting the same things that we get in general population. So I definitely think it's consistent with general population, but it still all matters on the person that's running it. So real quick, I'll touch on two questions. I want to get to Andy V, but I also want to get to Lola. Lola said, what's the difference between jail and prison? The main difference is basically the inmates in the jail have, less than a year, or they haven't been sentenced yet. So they're still going through the process, preparing their case, and we're waiting for them to get sentenced. Once they have been sentenced, they, if they get sentenced to a year or more, they get handed over to the state. And now, the state will go ahead and take custody and control. I think the tough parts Jail gets them right from the streets. So the inmates are still, well, I know I'm calling them inmates, guys. I work at a prison. So the people that have been arrestees, whatever they are, they're kind of still going through the process, getting adjusted. I think jails have a higher rate of recidivism because inmates are becoming in and out all the time. One of the big things for me was I found that jails have definitely some tough aspects because they're coming in from the streets. Still could be drug, going through withdrawal, whatever it is. They could have weapons on them, a bunch of stuff. Don't get me wrong, prisons they could too, but for the most part, what I mean is they're coming in from the jail. They're coming in from the streets directly to the jail. When the prison gets them, it's usually they've already been in a jail and they're coming directly to us. One of the things that I think makes it tough for a prison is that inmates have time to plan things. And inmates in a prison are very conditioned to the uniform. So, like, if you're an officer and you think your uniform is going to protect you and give you that authority, you're wrong. It's all about who you are. It's going to touch into Andy's question about being yourself. If that inmate, they don't care about the uniform for that level of authority. All they care about is you and how you treat them. And there's a story I shared a while back about, let's say you're driving a car and you get pulled over by a cop. And it's the first time you ever get pulled over. You do the whole routine, keys on the roof, hands on the wheel, whatever, window open, and just waiting for the person to come, whatever, just waiting for the officer has that impression on you. The sirens are on, you're in that mode. But if that same cop pulls you over 30 times in a row, you're going to change. What the fuck's wrong with you? How many times and you start, because now you're not seeing the uniform. Now it's more of, who this individual is. So imagine inmates that are working in the prison system, locked in for 10, 20, 30 years. You think the uniform carries any level of authority? It's not. It's who you are. So I think I think that could be a slight difference, again, because these inmates have already been introduced to the system and they're familiar with, and that's another thing, guys. Inmates in the prison are also very familiar with the routines and what's expected of us. In some cases, sad to say, they know the job better than we do. So that's why it's good for us to be on point. But hey, Russ, just to touch on Lola's question, what's your thoughts?
Okay, so real quick, for the most part, what you've got is you've got jails and prisons, right? And jails tend to be, for the most part, at the county level or sometimes the municipal level, which just means the city, right? And those are, for the most part, fresh context, pre-trial detention facilities, right? Then you have some other jails, or sometimes it's the same facility that do have inmates there that have been sentenced, but they've been sentenced to carry out the end of their sentence within that facility, or sometimes they're waiting to go to prison. If you go to a place like Pennsylvania, though, Pennsylvania calls all of their county facilities prisons. So sometimes this jargon, it can get a little bit confusing, but that is it for the most part. Prisons tend to be run by the states, right? And those run by the states are people that have already been sentenced, convicted for their crimes, and now they're just going through, paying their time back.
And I want to add, when it comes to the dangers, I believe they both have heightened levels of danger. I believe there's a lot of similarities in our jobs. Again, I have respect for obviously those that work in the jail just as much as I have respect for those that work in the prison. I think both jobs could be very dangerous. Okay, so the last question. Okay, wait. Is there a mandatory retirement age for prison guards? Common retirement age for people is 65, but I'm thinking a 64-year-old prison guard is a heck no. It depends on the state. I mean, some is 25 and out, and you're good. So if you start the career at 20, you can retire at 45 with 65%. 65% pension. I mean, again, it depends on the state, but you have some other areas where it all depends on, I believe, the pension aspect of it all. Can you complete whatever that amount of time is? So in some cases, if let's say you start at 45, but you need that 25 year to get that pension, then they could probably force you out at 65. But again, it really does depend.
It depends on what their standards are for you maintaining at that point. Some of them have no real standards whatsoever, and then some of them have much stricter standards. Hey, just so you know, if I suddenly wink out, it's because my phone is slowly dying here.
No, wait, I have one last question before we go, Russ. Hold on.
Okay.
Hey guys, by the way, when it comes to, I've seen people go in the academy at 59 years old. I've seen it. So, I mean, again, it does depend on the individual, because that 59-year-old was outshining those young bucks. You know what I mean? So I like what Russ said. It really depends on the individual, but also again what the agency allows. I mean, if you get past a certain age, there could be a greater liability, and at that point, we need to get that person out because that person. But you know what's funny, real quick? I've worked with older officers that just get the respect of the unit too. They keep it going and they just have that respect. So a lot of inmates, funny thing is that they respect it and they don't give that old timer that much of a hassle because you know what, just as much as they've done, like let's say 30 years in, so is this old timer. So again, I really do think there's a lot of variables in play, but for the most part, the states may mandate or the pension system may mandate, the age before you're forced to retire. And plus, don't forget, guys, after a certain point, there's only so much you can collect from your pension. So at a certain point, you may max out that pension. So why stay any longer than that? So 25, you get this, 30 years, you get this. After that, that's it. It's just stuck at that percentage. At that point, just go out and get another job. I don't, you secured the pension, go. Okay, so last question is from Andy B. And we'll run this real quick. Can you guys touch a bit on being yourself? I'm kind of quiet and observant. How does that carry over for command presence at a facility?
Okay. So let me answer it first so my phone doesn't die. But you do have to be yourself. But at the same time, you have to develop the things that are yours and you have to try and turn them into strengths rather than weaknesses. So if you tend to be more on the quiet side, you still need to be able to have a command presence. You still have to be able to project it. I relied on being loud a lot. I'll be honest, but at the same time, for you, you may have to develop a new facet of your personality. That doesn't mean you're going to be loud all the time, but it does mean that you're going to maybe need to be able to carry out some things that aren't in your natural wheelhouse. And that's all part of developing new skill sets. So what you want to do is you want to take and you want to build upon the things that you're naturally good at. And then you want to also develop a few skill sets that will help you along the way. So work on that command presence, work on being able to project a little bit of volume when you need to, and then really work on and just make sure that your communication skills are up to par and that you're able to impress upon an inmate or set of inmates what you need them to do, what your expectations are, and just slowly become the best person that you can possibly be so that when you say, well, I just need to be myself, that self is going to carry the day.
Yeah, and Andy, I did a quick post on Facebook today that kind of answers that, and I've done videos on this before, guys. By the way, but the quote I put today was, "To survive a career in corrections, you must find a balance between who you are and who you need to be when you're behind the wall. This should not be seen as a transformation, but rather a transition that is strengthened by the best advice I was ever given. Just be yourself." A lot of people think you have to be aggressive. That gets the job done. That's not what gets the job done. It's not. You're not going to intimidate these men, or these women. The way to get the job done is be yourself. And when you're yourself, you're able to be more consistent. When you're consistent, one thing, you start trusting in yourself now, because now you're able to have confidence in yourself. Consistency brings trust and confidence, and then the inmates start to see that. But it starts here first. And then you manifest that out. But at any moment you're not yourself, the inmates, they're going to see that and they're going to play you out. So again, be who you need to be, especially with those interactions with the inmate. And before we go to close, inmates cannot be forced to take the COVID vaccine, but we can give them incentives, like maybe some more food packages or stuff like that to motivate them. But you're not allowed, based on HIPAA, to force an inmate to take any vaccination, but it is encouraged. And again, those, we usually try external incentives. So real quick, guys, Rush, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
I just want to thank everyone for their time and for their input and for asking us all these great questions. And you know what? If you're out there working, man, stay safe, stay nervous, people.
Yeah, guys, just want to say I love you guys. So first off, we have the original community that was already on Tier Talk, kind of partner now with the Duty Ron. And it's great to have people that are coming from the outside that are giving respect to this profession and then connecting with the community on the inside. This is how we grow, by working together and providing an understanding and for once break away from how the media portrays what we do. So in this community, everybody's welcome. If you have any questions, we will give those questions the best answers we could provide. I'll bring in more professionals, and I will do whatever I can to teach you what happens behind that wall. And I'm very fair and honest, and that so is Russ. I mean, obviously we have people that are not perfect, But again, we don't generalize the system based on the negativities of the one. So in aspect, we'll tell you what they fucked up on, but we'll also be quick to tell you how that doesn't represent us. But in the end, if you guys have any more questions or you want stuff for us to cover, my email again is gangianthony@yahoo.com. Russ, what's your email again?
It's sierra.sargent@gmail.com.
Yeah, and every one of you guys today down on this thing, Dawn Marie, Lola J, Dr. Z, I mean, just the whole list goes on. The family that is now connecting us from Duty Ron, my family of Tear Talk, this is what makes the show. And every day, guys, the questions that you ask challenge us, and it brings us up a notch. So I do appreciate you. And Russ went sideways there. I don't know what happened there. But as always, guys, I think his phone finally died. So let me just get that solo layout. As always, guys, love you guys. Stay safe. And don't forget, this Tuesday, we have another live stream coming up as well. So, but as always, guys, and guys, if you get a chance, check out my last video. We talked about dealing with pregnant inmates. It was an hour and a half discussion, but I think a lot of you guys would definitely find that dialogue very interesting. As always, guys, happy 4th. Love you. Stay safe.